The room smelled like lavender and something sterile. Soft light filtered through cream-colored curtains, brushing gently against the pale face of Celeste Morgan. She lay in a hospital bed that overlooked the quiet garden wing of St. Augustine Memorial, a place meant for dignified departures. Her skin, once rich with warmth, had faded to an ivory tone, her cheekbones sharper than they used to be. She was 43 years old, though the silence in her eyes made her seem older. Tired. Finished. Machines hummed softly around her, monitoring a body that had decided to shut itself down in whispers rather than screams. But it was not death that consumed her now. It was the lie they did not know. None of them did. Not the nurses, not the doctors. Not even her own sister, who had flown in from Baltimore the week before. They all believed she was unmarried, that her life had been solitary, that she was simply another woman drifting quietly toward the end. They did not know that she was the wife of Eli Rutherford, the Eli Rutherford. Billionaire real estate mogul, media darling, the man whose face appeared in Forbes, Fortune, and on plaques above Manhattan's tallest towers, known for his philanthropy, his charm, and most of all, his bachelor lifestyle. The truth? He had never been single. He had been married to her for 12 years. Celeste turned her head slightly, gazing at the untouched bouquet on her side table. White roses, sent from an old friend. They were from him. She knew his handwriting even when the letters were typed. He had not called, not even once since her admittance 2 weeks ago. He knew she was dying, and still, nothing. A weak smile crept onto her lips, bitter and small. That was Eli, always present in absence. She used to think it was love. Back then, when they met in a DC bookstore and debated Baldwin over coffee, she believed she had found something extraordinary. He was brilliant, persuasive, disarming. She had never known anyone like him. Someone who could quiet a room without speaking, who could make you feel seen and erased in the same breath. Their connection had been electric and dangerous. "I want to protect this," he had told her once, brushing her curls behind her ear as they lay in bed. "The world's not ready for a man like me to love a woman like you." She had thought it was caution. Now she knew it was cowardice. No one ever saw them together in public. No shared interviews, no appearances. He lived his life in the light. She existed in the margins of it, always hidden, always kept. 12 years of silence. 12 years of back entrances and black cars at night. And now, as her body gave out, she realized no one would ever know she had existed, unless she told them. Celeste reached slowly for the drawer beside her bed. Her fingers trembled as they gripped a small leather notebook, worn, frayed at the edges. She had started writing again after the diagnosis. Not for therapy, for evidence. Inside it were dates, photographs, handwritten letters, financial transfers, details no one could deny. If she died today, the world would bury her with a different name, unless that notebook found the light. The door creaked open. A nurse walked in. Young, brown-skinned, kind eyes. "You need anything, Ms. Morgan?" Celeste looked up at her, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said. "I need a witness. Before the illness, before the hospital bed, before the long silences and unanswered calls, there had been fire." Celeste met Eli Rutherford on a rain-drenched Thursday at a civil rights fundraiser in Washington, D.C. She had been invited to speak, sharp, passionate, unapologetically black in a room of mostly white donors. She remembered the way he watched her from across the room, hands tucked in his pockets, expression unreadable. Not smiling, just studying. After her speech, he approached her with a drink in one hand and a line that still made her ache. "You make people uncomfortable. That's how I know you're telling the truth." She had rolled her eyes. "And what makes you comfortable, Mr. Rutherford?" His reply came instantly. "Women who say my name like it's not a threat." They talked for hours that night, about Baldwin, zoning laws, the illusion of meritocracy, and jazz. She told him about the tenants she was helping fight eviction. He told her about buildings he was trying to make less ugly. Their worlds could not have been further apart. Yet something connected, something chemical. He was engaged then, to the daughter of a senator. She told him to stay away. He didn't. What followed were months of late-night drives, stolen weekends, and quiet dinners in untraceable towns. He bought out small restaurants, just to sit across from her undisturbed, sent poetry to her email, promised nothing but gave everything she didn't know she craved. She hated how easily she fell, but he knew exactly what to say. "You don't understand," he once said, voice low against her neck. "This world would eat us alive. I'm not hiding you, Celeste, I'm protecting what we have." It sounded noble, almost romantic, and when he proposed, 3 months after breaking off his engagement, she said yes. They married in secret. No guests, no cameras, no ring in public, just 2 signatures on a courthouse form in Maryland, and a whispered promise. One day, the world will be ready. But that day never came. Back in the hospital, Celeste shifted her eyes to the leather-bound notebook in her lap. Her thumb traced the edge of a photo tucked between the pages, one of the few that existed of them together. She in a rust-colored dress, he in a rolled-up Oxford shirt, no tie. A private villa in Lake Como. No staff, no phones. Just them. That was the year he stopped showing up. His calls grew shorter, his excuses longer. Then one day, she saw him on the cover of Architectural Digest, posing beside a new development and a new woman. The caption read, "Eli Rutherford's Solo Rise." She had sat on the floor for hours that day, phone in hand, no one to call. Over time, the promises faded, the poems stopped. Even the payments, those scheduled monthly transfers to her foundation, began arriving later, as if she were no longer a wife, but a line item in his guilt. It was not that he left her, it was that he let her disappear. And now, as she stared at the ceiling tiles above, one thought burned clearer than all the rest. He made me invisible. But she would not die that way. The house was beautiful. 3 stories of modern glass and polished oak nestled in the Virginia countryside, surrounded by trees that whispered secrets no one else would hear. It was a gift, one Eli insisted on after their quiet wedding. A retreat, he'd called it. Your sanctuary. But to Celeste Morgan, it was a mausoleum for a love that had learned how to disappear without leaving a mess. The bedroom held no photos. The closets were lined with designer clothes she never wore. Every week a courier delivered fresh flowers, fresh groceries, and an envelope with a small note. "Hope you're well. E." No signature. Never a phone call to go with it. The only sound that kept her company was the television. Eli's voice echoed through the living room often. Press conferences, real estate expos, gala speeches. Always confident, always polished, and never once mentioning a wife. Not even a hint. She watched him standing beside political donors, tech CEOs, and women who wore white and leaned in too close. She kept a small notebook of their names, Fiona, Amber, Lisette, just to prove to herself she wasn't imagining it. He called every Sunday, exactly 10 minutes, always polite, always empty. "How are you feeling?" "Fine. I'm glad. I've been swamped. I saw you on CNN." "Yeah." That was last minute. She looked familiar. Silence. Then, "Celeste, you know how the world would see this. I'm protecting you." That phrase, he had used it so often it had become his permission slip. Protecting her from what? A world that could not accept a black woman beside a white empire? Or a world that might ask why she had never been seen in the first place? She tried once to confront him in person, drove all the way to New York, waited outside his corporate office for 4 hours. When he finally appeared, stepping out of a black SUV and a tailored coat, he did not even flinch. "Celeste," he said flatly, "this isn't the time or place." "Does that time even exist, Eli?" He walked past her. She cried in the parking lot, then drove home in silence. Weeks later, she stood in the hallway, barefoot, arms folded tightly across her chest, staring at a framed magazine cover. It was Eli smiling, hand on the back of a woman with champagne blonde curls. The article was about his latest philanthropy through design initiative. The woman's name wasn't in the caption, but her presence was loud enough. Celeste touched the glass lightly, her reflection ghosting beside his. No rings, no photos. No trace of their history outside the boundaries of that house. She was a wife on paper, but in every other way she had become a stranger. That night, she opened a drawer and pulled out the first notebook she'd kept during law school. Blank. Pages filled with promise. She flipped it open and began to write again. Not for Eli, for herself. It had been late spring when the second line appeared. Celeste sat on the cold edge of the marble bathtub, her hand trembling as she stared down at the test. 2 pink lines, soft, undeniable. She touched her stomach, not even visible yet, and let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob. For a moment she imagined Eli holding her, lifting her into his arms, whispering that everything would change now. She waited 3 days before telling him. He had been in Paris for a global housing summit, but she called anyway. Unusual, since he preferred to initiate every call himself. When he answered, she could tell he was in a car. "What's wrong?" he asked quickly. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Then a sigh. Sharp, disappointed. "Celeste, are you sure?" She swallowed. "Yes." Another pause. "Okay. I need time to think." That was all he said. The next week passed in fog. Eli went silent. No follow-up call, no message, just silence like a stone wall. Celeste tried to rationalize. He was busy, shocked, overwhelmed. But the more she waited, the colder her thoughts became. She began to feel it. His retreat. The way he was already leaving. Already rewriting her out of a future that should have begun with joy. She did not eat. Could not sleep. The anxiety made her bones hum. She began to feel cramping. Then spotting. She called her doctor. They told her to rest, hydrate, and come in immediately if it worsened. She bled through the night, and by morning she was in the ER. No heartbeat. No baby. She stared at the hospital ceiling, hands folded across her stomach like she was still protecting something. The nurse asked if anyone was coming to be with her. "No," she said softly. "He's out of the country." The nurse placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I'm sorry." Celeste turned her face away. She was not sure which pain was worse, the loss of the child, or the realization that Eli would not even notice it. Was gone. When he finally called 2 days later, she let it ring. Back at home, she sat on the bedroom floor with her knees pulled to her chest. Around her were traces of a life she had built on the assumption that one day she would be chosen fully, openly. The nursery she had imagined, the names she had scribbled, the hope she had held. Gone. Vanished. But she did not scream. She did not break dishes or throw his photo against the wall. She went quiet. Not defeated, just changed. That was the moment something inside her began to sever. The love did not leave all at once. It slipped away quietly, thread by thread, like a rope unraveling in water. Still, she remained loyal. Not to him, but to the story she had once believed in. And though her body never carried a child again, the pain of that loss clung to her like a second skin. It made her slower, more watchful. It made her right. Because if the world would never see her, then at the very least her words would survive. Celeste had grown used to the quietness of dying. The days moved slowly now, measured not by clocks, but by the rhythm of hallway footsteps, the size of her machines, the tray that came in untouched and left the same way. No one in the hospital asked questions. No one looked too closely. They saw her as an unremarkable patient in a private wing, just another woman nearing her end. But Marla did. The young nurse entered her life like a flicker of light against a wall that had grown dim for too long. She was in her 20s with a calm voice, smooth brown skin and braids pulled back into a neat bun. She moved through the room with quiet confidence, fluffing pillows, adjusting tubes, checking vitals, always with care. But more than that, she looked at Celeste. Really looked. On the third day, she lingered longer than usual. "You don't talk much," Marla said gently as she opened the curtains, "but you see everything, I can tell." Celeste gave a faint smile. "And you're too smart to just be checking vitals." Marla laughed, surprised. "Guilty, I like puzzles, people, especially." A silence passed between them. Then, softly, "You waiting on someone?" Celeste's eyes drifted toward the window. No. Days passed. Their conversations grew from short exchanges to soft rituals. Marla brought books, asked about favorite songs. She never pried, but she noticed things. The notebook Celeste kept hidden beneath her pillow. The ring she wore on a chain and never spoke of. The name she almost said once in her sleep. Eli. Then one afternoon, the rain fell heavy, and Celeste looked different, emptier, like the pain had opened something. Marla pulled up the chair beside her. "You want to tell me what no one else knows?" Celeste closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice cracked from somewhere deep. "I was his wife. For 12 years, Marla blinked. "Whose wife?" Celeste turned her head toward her. "Eli Rutherford." The room seemed to shrink around them. Marla froze. "The Eli Rutherford?" Celeste nodded slowly. "I was his secret, his silence, his shame." Marla stared, stunned. Her heart thudded louder than the rain. "But no one—" "Exactly," Celeste cut in. "That was the arrangement. I lived in the shadows while he shined. But I was his wife. Every year, every lie." Marla's voice dropped. "Why are you telling me this now?" Celeste looked down at the thin gold ring in her hand. "Because there's a letter. In my drawer. And if I die here, if I die as a nobody, I need someone to make sure the truth lives." She reached with trembling fingers and pointed to the nightstand. "Promise me. If I don't wake up tomorrow, you'll send it." Marla's throat tightened. "Send it where?" Celeste met her eyes. "To the people who would care the most. Not the tabloids, the ones who have been erased like me." A beat passed. A quiet war in Marla's chest. The nurse, the woman. Then she reached forward and placed her hand over Celeste's. "I promise." That night, when the lights dimmed and the halls quieted, Marla sat alone in the break room staring at the folded letter in her hand. Her chest felt heavy. The truth buzzed in her mind like an alarm. She glanced at the nurse's station. No one watching. Carefully, she opened the envelope. Just enough to see the name at the top, "To whom the world forgot." And in that moment she realized, this was not just a confession, it was a reckoning. Eli Rutherford was a master of illusion. In public, he was all sharp angles and immaculate control, tailored suits, tightly scheduled appearances, and perfectly timed grins. By the time the news of his relationship with Fiona Walsh hit the press, the city barely blinked. Of course, the charming, philanthropic billionaire was seeing someone like Fiona. She was the perfect accessory. Fiona came from legacy, her family's name etched into Ivy League donor walls and East Coast museums. A former art curator turned media personality, she knew how to work a red carpet and a camera with equal ease. Her blonde waves, pale blue eyes, and practiced charm made her an ideal fit for Eli's world, or so it seemed. At first, their relationship was a whirlwind of private dinners, luxury getaways, and tightly controlled public sightings. Fiona was smart, ambitious, yes, but not easily fooled. She noticed how careful Eli was, how he always paid in cash at private clubs, how he changed his phone passcode weekly, how, despite being with her for nearly a year, she still had never set foot in the Virginia estate he claimed to own. "Why, don't you ever take me to your other house?" she asked once, lounging in his Manhattan penthouse in one of his shirts. He didn't flinch. "It's not ready," he said smoothly, pouring whiskey into crystal. "Too many memories," she pressed. "Of who?" Eli turned then, meeting her gaze for just a second too long. "Of who I used to be." Fiona let it go, but not because she believed him. One rainy evening, while Eli was away on business, Fiona stayed at his penthouse. He had given her a key, a coded gesture of trust. But Fiona had never been good at waiting. She wandered into his study, eyes scanning bookshelves, papers, drawers, looking for something. She wasn't sure what. Validation, maybe. Leverage. Or perhaps proof of the itch that had been building under her skin since the beginning. In the back of the bottom drawer, behind a folder of architectural renderings, she found a small black box. Inside was a ring. Not just any ring, delicate, worn at the edges, clearly loved. Yellow gold with a single sapphire. She turned it over. There, engraved inside, were the words, "Still, always, C." Her breath caught. She wasn't C. No one in his circle was C. The style of the ring wasn't modern or flashy. It was intimate, personal, a history too deep to be recent. Suddenly the lines clicked together. The secret house. The late calls. The careful lies. Fiona placed the ring back in the box, but not before taking a quick photo with her phone. Later that night, when Eli returned, she watched him carefully. He greeted her with a kiss, poured them wine, and settled onto the sofa beside her. "Tell me something honest," she said, voice casual. Eli raised a brow. "About what?" "About your past." He took a sip. "It's complicated." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I'm starting to believe you live your whole life that way." The next morning, Fiona left before sunrise. The photo of the ring burned in her mind, unanswered questions heavy in her chest. She didn't know who Celeste was, but she would. The air in Celeste's room was different that morning, sharper somehow, more awake. Marla noticed it the moment she walked in. The windows were open for the first time in days. A breeze moved through the curtains, brushing softly against the bed frame. Celeste was already sitting upright, hair pulled back, face pale, but focused. "I need a favor," she said quietly before Marla could even greet her. "One more." Marla nodded, unsure. "What is it?" Celeste's eyes were steady. "There's a man arriving at 11. He's a lawyer. I told the front desk. He's my cousin." "You're well enough for legal appointments?" Celeste gave a faint, ironic smile. "You'd be amazed what the body can do when the soul has something left to finish." Marla said nothing more. But when 11 a.m. came, she opened the door, without hesitation. The man who entered was older, with silver hair and kind, tired eyes. His name was Thomas Bellamy, a civil rights attorney who had once worked with Celeste on housing discrimination cases. He had not seen her in over 7 years. "I thought you disappeared," he said gently as he sat beside her. "I did," she whispered, "but not by choice." Thomas unfolded a folder from his case, set out 3 documents, and looked at her. "Are you sure?" Celeste nodded. He slid the first document forward. It was a notarized declaration of marriage. Signed, sealed, and original, the date 12 years prior. "I want it all included," Celeste said. "The photos, the bank transfers, the records of the house deed in his name." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Even the ones from the foundation account?" "Especially those." The second document was a legal statement. One she had dictated over the phone 2 weeks earlier, revised twice. It detailed a life spent silenced, by race, by gender, by shame. But it was the third item that took the longest. Her letter. Celeste wrote it in longhand, using a black ink fountain pen Marla had brought her days earlier. It filled 7 pages. Every word bled with memory. She wrote about the morning she met Eli, the taste of their first kiss, the ring he never let her wear in public, the baby that never made it, the way her name had been erased from every corner of his world. the loneliness of being married to a myth. But she also wrote about her love for herself, hard-won, for the black women who came before her, unseen and unthanked, for the girls who would grow up believing their pain was not a footnote, but a headline. By the time she signed the final page, her hands were shaking. Thomas sealed the documents into a waterproof legal envelope. "What should I do with it?" he asked. Celeste turned to Marla. "She knows." Marla stepped forward and took the envelope with both hands, holding it like it carried weight far beyond paper. "I'll make sure they read every word," she said, her voice low. Celeste exhaled, the deepest breath she had taken in days. "That's all I needed." When Thomas left, Celeste lay back against the pillows, eyes half closed. The light through the curtains had shifted. The sky was gray now, soft and full of promise. "Why now?" Marla asked gently, watching her. Celeste smiled. "Because for the first time, I'm not afraid of being seen." Celeste Morgan died just before sunrise. There were no alarms, no sudden gasps, just the slow, final stillness of a body that had nothing left to give. Marla found her during the morning rounds. The covers were pulled neatly over her chest, her face peaceful, her hand resting on the leather notebook she had refused to let go. It looked like she had fallen asleep mid-thought, halfway between silence and the truth. Marla stood in the doorway for several seconds, unmoving. Then she stepped forward and touched the back of Celeste's hand. It was cool, still, final. She whispered, "I'm sorry," and meant it in every way a woman could. The hospital called Eli Rutherford. His assistant picked up. The official word passed to his office was simple. Celeste Morgan, patient in private suite 4B, expired at 5:27 a.m. He did not ask questions. No return call, no condolences, no public statement. Later that morning, Eli attended a breakfast fundraiser in Manhattan. Cameras flashed. He shook hands with a senator and smiled at the press. When asked about the rumors of a possible engagement, to Fiona Walsh he chuckled and said, "Not yet, but life is full of surprises." At 9:03 a.m., while Eli was still in the limousine leaving the event, Marla was mailing the envelope. It was addressed to Journal Black Voices Unfiltered, a rising, Black-owned investigative magazine known for their no-compromise journalism. She had written a short note to accompany it. "This story is not about scandal. It's about erasure. Her name was Celeste Morgan, and she deserves to be remembered." The envelope arrived 2 days later. It was opened by senior editor Nadine Hall, who read the entire letter without stopping once. She called an emergency staff meeting that night. They spent 72 hours vetting every detail. Marriage license, confirmed. House deed, confirmed. Financial transfers, traceable. The handwriting, matched. The ring, shown in dated photos worn on a chain. The rest, the emotional abuse, the silence, the betrayal, was harder to prove. But the truth lived in the details. On the 5th day, they published the story. The headline read, "Billionaire's Hidden Marriage to Black Woman, 12 Years of Lies Uncovered on Her Deathbed." The subhead, an exclusive exposé on Celeste Morgan, her silenced truth, and the man who built an empire by burying her existence. It went live at midnight. By dawn, it had over 1 million shares. The internet erupted. Hashtags trended. Say her name. Celeste Morgan. Buried in. Silence Black Twitter turned her into a symbol of invisibility, of resilience, of quiet rebellion. Celebrities reposted the story with stunned captions. Civil rights organizations demanded answers. Feminist scholars began quoting lines from Celeste's handwritten letter on podcasts and morning news segments. Screenshots of her words flooded timelines. "I was not hidden because I was loved. I was hidden because he was ashamed of being seen beside me. To the world I was no one, but I was his someone. If silence is protection, why did it always feel like erasure?" Back in the hospital, Marla sat in the empty room with her phone screen glowing. She watched the comment sections grow. She saw women write their own stories of being silenced, erased, reduced, and she knew Celeste's life had not ended in that room. It had started something. In Eli's penthouse, silence was no longer a tool, it was a sentence. He stood at the window, phone in hand, staring at the headline for the fourth time. He scrolled past 1,000 comments, then paused on a single photo. Celeste, young, laughing. Holding his hand, he shut the phone off. But the silence stayed. The world moved fast once the story broke, but not fast enough for Eli Rutherford to outrun it. By sunrise, major news networks picked up Journal's exposé. What began as a headline on a niche black media site ignited a firestorm across cable news and social platforms. By noon, anchors on CNN and MSNBC were calling it the most shocking marital cover-up since Watergate, while conservative outlets attempted to redirect the outrage. But the real response came from the people. Celeste Morgan flooded every feed. Her name was painted on murals in Brooklyn, chanted at protests in Atlanta, stitched on jackets in Oakland. Instagram pages began posting her handwritten quotes, some even tattooing them. "I was not hidden because I was loved" became a rallying cry for women of color worldwide who had loved loudly in silence. Black communities, already weary of being erased, found clarity in Celeste's quiet devastation. She became both symbol and soul, proof that the most painful betrayals often happened in private, behind polished veneers and diversity statements. Within 48 hours, Fiona Walsh released a statement of her own. It was short. "I will not be complicit in the erasure of a woman whose truth deserved daylight. I was misled. I have ended all personal and professional ties with Mr. Rutherford." She vanished from the press after that. But her exit triggered a deeper unraveling. Former employees of Roth Urban Development began to speak out. Anonymous testimonials surfaced, describing years of discriminatory hiring, coded language in client meetings, and diversity efforts that were, as one put it, cosmetic at best. One HR director revealed that applications with ethnic-sounding names were filtered into a separate review folder, quietly titled Secondary. The scandal grew teeth. By day 3, Eli Rutherford was no longer a mogul. He was a man cornered, and, for the first time in his career, he had to speak. He held the press conference on a Wednesday morning, flanked by lawyers and publicists. The location was sterile, his corporate headquarters under too bright lighting. The room was packed. He stepped up to the microphone, expression stiff, lips dry. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned in. "I want to begin by acknowledging," he paused, eyes flicking left, "by acknowledging the truth." His voice wavered. "She, Celeste Morgan, was my wife." It was the first time he had ever said her name aloud in public, and it shattered him. The words caught in his throat. He blinked hard, hands shaking slightly as he tried to continue. But the moment swallowed him. Reporters began shouting questions. Why did you hide her? Was race the reason? Why didn't she appear in any company filings? Did you pressure her into silence? Was the miscarriage covered up? Eli opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. His silence, once carefully curated, had become his confession. He stepped away from the podium, face pale, body trembling. The press conference ended in chaos. That night, news clips played side by side, Celeste's calm voice reading her letter in a narration overlay, while Eli's broken silence looped again and again. In living rooms, dorm halls, and churches, people watched. In barbershops and boardrooms, they talked. And everywhere, they remembered her. In the quiet of her old hospital room, the light from the window touched the empty bed. The truth had finally found its way in. It did not end with the article. In the weeks following the exposé, a cascade of consequences swept through Eli Rutherford's empire. Lawsuits were filed. Class action claims by former employees, accusations of discriminatory business practices, falsified diversity audits, all backed by whistleblowers who finally had the courage to speak. The SEC launched a formal inquiry into his charitable foundation's financial inconsistencies. Several high-profile board members resigned. Stockholders pulled out. Real estate deals stalled. But while Eli's legacy fractured under public scrutiny, Celeste's name began to rise. Her notebook, once tucked under her hospital pillow, was published in full with only minor edits. The release, Letters from the Quiet Wife, soared to the top of bestseller lists. Raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically, black, the pages revealed not only the pain of erasure but the clarity of survival. Each entry struck a different chord. I did not want to be a secret. I became one to survive him. If they never saw me standing beside him, it is because he never had the strength to stand beside me. There is no freedom in being tolerated. Book clubs discussed it. Professors assigned it. Activists quoted it at rallies. The words Celeste once wrote in the dark became light for others. 3 months after her death, the Celeste Morgan Foundation for Justice was announced. It began with a grassroots crowdfunding campaign launched by Marla and a few of Celeste's former colleagues, but it quickly attracted national support. The foundation's mission was simple but bold: to provide legal education funding for young black women pursuing civil rights law. The first grant ceremony was held at a public park in Washington, D.C., the same city where Celeste had once given speeches to rooms that barely listened. Now hundreds gathered among them: journalists, politicians, former clients, and women she had mentored from the shadows. Her younger sister, Danielle, stood at the front, clutching a tissue, tears sliding down her cheeks as she listened to the opening remarks. Marla stepped up to the podium last. She kept her voice steady. "She changed me," Marla said. Not with loud speeches, but with quiet courage. In her final days, she didn't ask for revenge, she asked for truth, and truth, real truth, doesn't just survive, it changes the world. A hush fell. Then came the unveiling. A bronze plaque beneath the garden's main archway, newly installed and polished under the sunlight. The engraving read, "In honor of Celeste Morgan, a woman who chose truth over silence, love over fear, and legacy over erasure." Marla stepped forward, placed her hand on the cool metal, and whispered. She made sure the truth lived. Eli Rutherford disappeared from public life before the year was out. No formal statement, no farewell tour, no redemption attempt. He simply vanished, retreating to a gray stone house tucked deep into the hills of upstate New York. The property was sprawling, cold, and silent, a place meant for quiet, not peace. There were no staff. He cooked his own meals, rarely left the grounds. The grand piano in the sitting room gathered dust. The cell phone he once used for round-the-clock business now stayed powered off, buried in a drawer he no longer opened. He had everything he once claimed to want, and yet the silence gnawed at him. At night, he sat in the study where the fire never crackled and read her words. The original letter, not the version that went viral, but the one in her handwriting with uneven lines and ink smudged at the edges. He had received it in the mail 6 weeks after the article dropped. No return address, just a plain envelope with his name printed in script he would recognize anywhere. He read it once, then again, and again, and again. "You were always so proud of your image. I was always trying to be small enough to fit inside it. I loved you more than you earned, and you feared the world more than you trusted me. I would have stood beside you even in fire. You just never wanted to be seen, burning beside me." The words struck harder with each pass. He saw her now, finally, not as a shadow at the edge of his legacy, but as the center of the life he had spent years pretending he hadn't lived. He thought about her laughter, her eyes when she was angry, the day she lost the baby and didn't ask him to come, not because she didn't need him, but because she already knew he wouldn't. He realized how often she had made space for him and how rarely he had returned the favor. One evening, as rain drummed steadily against the windows, Eli pulled a small wooden box from the top shelf of his armoire. It was cedar, hand-carved. He opened it slowly, revealing a single item resting inside: her ring. The same one Fiona had once found. Simple. Sapphire. Engraved. He held it gently between his fingers and read the inscription again. Still.
Always, see.
Then, without a word, He placed it inside the box and closed the lid. On the top, freshly engraved, was her full name, Celeste Morgan Rutherford. He stared at it for a long time, fingers resting on the lid like he could somehow hold on to her through wood and memory. Then in the quiet of the room he whispered, "Celeste." It was not a call. It was not a prayer. It was the weight of a name he had spent a lifetime avoiding, spoken now to a room that would never answer back.